A Broken Dream is a Roblox game I played after replaying Jim's computer. I went into it completely blind, barely skimming the description, because I absolutely love Dreamcore, and I have loved it since its rise around 2021, and to no one's surprise, I loved it. I loved it so much that I started writing this script less than 10 minutes after I finished playing it, or rather, what content there is to play. It's unfinished so far, but I think I'm picking up on what it's putting down. This video will be split into 3 main parts. Summaries of levels with my personal reading spliced into them, what I think will happen in the following chapter, and my review of it so far. The protagonist, I believe, has a complex dissociative disorder. Particularly, I think they have a form of OSDD, dissociative amnesia, since they don't showcase very clear and distinct parts. Disclaimer: I don't think my rating is necessarily the author's intended rating. I am just talking about what it feels like to me as someone with a dissociative disorder, and how it could read to others with such disorders. While I will be talking about what the story could be generally, I will also be talking about my specific rating of it. Trigger warnings for mentions of dissociation, childhood trauma, and drug abuse. Viewer discretion is advised. Reality. Reality is the first level, or rather, it's the prologue. It starts in 2030 and ends in 2040, becoming increasingly desaturated over those years. The protagonist becomes depressed and out of touch with reality, dissociated, which is why they turn to dream pills so easily, because they are uninterested in their own life. These dream pills, advertised as making a person fall asleep forever, do just that to the protagonist. The prologue ends with them swallowing a pill, and then they are transported to Cloud Theater. Cloud Theater involves the player turning on computers in a, theater, in order to move from one dreamscape to the next. Most people experience a form of dissociation when consuming media, wherein the rest of the world around them doesn't matter, and they stay focused and emotionally invested in the events on screen, as if it were happening to them. This can be seen here with the computers and the theater. Both movies and video games involve that form of dissociation. They need a certain level of dissociation to ride a train to the next dream. Trains, along with other modes of transportation, often induce dissociation in those with dissociative tendencies. In fact, the first question on the Dissociative Experiences Scale, a self-assessment tool for people who struggle with dissociation, is: some people have the experience of driving or riding in a car or a bus or subway, and suddenly realizing that they don't remember what has happened during all or part of the trip. Select the number to show what percentage of the time this happens to you. It's important to note that this is where, quote, everything changes if you don't look at it, is introduced. An important element in the dream world. After the last computer is turned on, the protagonist is taken to Dream Elementary. Dream Elementary is set in an elementary school, and apparently the specific dream takes place during 2015. The classroom the protagonist spawns in appears to be a kindergarten classroom. The current year in the real world is 2040, which means 25 years have passed since the person's kindergarten years. Most children enter kindergarten around age 5, making the protagonist 30 years old. It's important to note that most diagnoses of DID are made around age 30 of the patient. Not too related, but I thought it was interesting. Anyway, the first task we are given is to make time pass by changing the clock in the cafeteria. It is here that I noticed one of the posters in the cafeteria says, quote, please dream at the tables. Perhaps the cafeteria at their elementary school was particularly dissociating. Do note that question 20 on the Dissociative Experiences Scale says, quote, some people find that they sometimes sit staring off into space, thinking of nothing, and are not aware of the passage of time. Select the number to show what percentage of the time this happens to you. Why does the cafeteria specifically induce dissociation for them? I'll get into that later. Put a pin in that. For now, it's time to go back to the classroom and meet Miss Caregiver, and she's exactly what it says on the tin, a caregiver. It is here where I need to introduce the concept of obscured faces, as it will be relevant throughout the story. Miss Caregiver, like a few other characters, has only one eye and no other distinct facial features. But unlike those other characters, I think that her having only an eye symbolizes her watching over the protagonist and keeping them safe. She does not need any other features because she exists in the protagonist's mind as a figure who only needs 2 emotions, calm and happy, and that eye does both well. After introducing herself, she asks the protagonist what their name is. and they don't know how to answer, as if they have forgotten their own name, possibly a sign of dissociative amnesia. Anyway, during Miss C's lesson, the protagonist interjects with this: "I want to travel the world when I grow up," and then asks themselves why they said that. This is the earliest mention of the protagonist's possible social anxiety, a topic which will be further expanded upon in both this level and others. In fact, almost right after this, recess starts, and the protagonist remarks that they wouldn't like to play with other kids their age, and would instead rather stay inside. But before that, Miss C remarks, "You may be new, but you've been here forever." Which furthers my belief that the protagonist is dreaming about their own childhood, albeit with a few changes. The next task we have to do is to move the clocks ahead once again, to pass recess. And we have to do so without letting any adults see us. So the protagonist needs to quickly pass time during lunch, which is usually a social setting for kids, and during recess, another place where one would typically socialize. Perhaps this means that they dissociated to avoid the boredom that comes with isolation, or they dissociated to avoid meaningfully engaging in conversation with others. But I'm not too sure how literal the staying inside during recess is, which will affect my rating of the untrusted adult. The untrusted adult is, well, for one, horrifying. His only expression is a wide-mouthed scream, with his sharp teeth and beady eyes. He is dressed very formally, especially when compared to Miss C, and he has quite the tall stature. It evokes the idea of power, and I believe that he may represent someone specific in the protagonist's life, since he has a very specific look. Perhaps the principal, given the proposed position of power. If the staying inside during recess is literal, and the protagonist has bad memories of staying inside and getting caught, then this could be the man that caught them. If the staying inside during recess is figurative, and it represents heavily dissociating during social events, then the untrusted adult will be someone who preyed upon that lack of social awareness. When he catches the player, there are a few sets of dialogue he may say, including, but obviously not limited to, "Do you belong here?" and "Where are your friends?" While these could be a question one asks it, while these could be questions one asks a child who's not in the correct area, they could also be questions one asks a child with a lacking social life. Most of the questions he asks them are double entendres, and an adult who preys upon a child who has no one else to turn to, attacking them when they know there's no one around, that's a little bit more than a little bit problematic. One of the posters in the cafeteria reads, "Feeling unsafe?" with a picture of the untrusted adult, possibly alluding to the fact that the other adults around him know he's unsafe and yet refuse to do anything about it. Perhaps because of his position of power. At the very least, the untrusted adult is an abuser. One of the death messages reads, "This is my dream. If I just blur out the nightmares, maybe they won't exist anymore." And another one reads, "He is an untrusted adult. Don't get too close." Once all of the clocks are turned to the right time, the player can go back to their classroom, and they lose themselves in a drawing, quite literally, as the player is transported to the drawing world, where they explore their drawn home, particularly their own basement, full of mazes, for some reason. Once they leave the drawing world, Miss C remarks,
"Seems like you were lost in your own world. You know, it's already the end of the day. Don't be late getting home."
Which ties right into question 20 on the dissociative experiences scale again. And while they may not have been thinking of nothing, they were still not in touch with the real world. Anyway, the next task is to leave the school without running into any of the protagonist's peers. And if the protagonist fails, the child they ran into can say one of a few phrases, including, "You're weird," and "Stop blocking my way," and among other generally rude kind of childish statements. This furthers the idea that the protagonist was ostracized during their childhood. Once you reach these doors, you have to go upstairs, avoiding the same peers, in order to fully leave. One of the death messages here reads, "I don't remember a school like this." The clock hands here are rotating impossibly fast, indicating a quick time passage associated with dissociation. Perhaps the protagonist doesn't remember school being this horrifying because they forgot about it, because during every traumatic moment, they attempted to manipulate time. Once the player reaches the final set of doors, they are transported to Grassy Beach. The first thing you'll notice about this level is that it has traffic signs all over it, things one would typically see while riding in a car. It is also referred to as a beach, which is essentially a bridge between land and sea. This entire level oozes that liminal space vibe because of it, and liminal spaces on their own, I'd argue, are inherently dissociative. Refer back to question 1 on the dissociative experiences scale. This level involves the player collecting their own memories. It tells us that we do not need to collect all of them, just enough to leave, which implies that we are forgetting most of them in favor of some. This level, to me, represents dissociative amnesia the most out of all of these. In a place with traffic signs, we forget most of our memories. I'd like to point out a few memories I found. One is of a TV, one is of a blank wall, and another is of the next level, the twist. The TV obviously represents dissociation via media, the blank wall would be true dissociation, and the twist, well, we'll get to that. Once we collect enough memories, we are able to remember. Hi, unknown memory from the hit video game A Broken Dream. Why are you holding a circular intersection sign? Whatever. Maybe it's just a random road sign. On to the twist. As soon as the protagonist enters this level, they say it isn't relaxing, but it'll hopefully be over soon, so they can forget it. Once we go past the series of tubes, we find 2 doors. The right one, if we enter it, drives us insane. Here's a little fun fact for you. People who heavily dissociate are more likely to experience psychosis. If we enter the left one, we find unknown memory again, along with several signs along the wall. Quote, "We walk the same, but we do not run the same. We always know where each other are. The rules of reality do not apply. We always hear each other. We watch each other. If you panic, I take over. We know when we run. We don't have to hide. Please do not run." And the rest of it just repeats, "If you panic, I take over." It seems obvious that, since it mirrors the protagonist's actions, unknown memory is the protagonist. Or, at the very least, they are part of them, or, literal reflection of them. And while "if you panic, I take over" is literal in this context, I think it can also represent switching. Some version of you, a version you know nothing about but that knows a lot about you, takes over when you panic. There's a fucking lot to connect here. I doubt I'm the only one. Anyway, once we leave that room, the right door is able to be entered, but not by unknown memory for some reason. My personal theory for why this is that unknown memory is blocked by the same shadows that blocked us off earlier, and that the shadows never truly left. The protagonist just found something worse than going insane, and subsequently will do anything to avoid it. But how bad is unknown memory that the protagonist would rather throw themselves into psychosis? So far, we've only been shown that they are another version of the protagonist, but we don't quite know what they're like just yet. Though, in one of their jumpscare messages, they say, "You know who I am." Well, the protagonist knows, at least subconsciously, who unknown memory is, as they had a memory of this level within the last level. We do not. So, for now, let's just collect some coins to put in the coin box. Doing so, we have to avoid unknown memory by not letting them notice we're panicking. To avoid them, we need to hide our feelings, dissociate from our emotions. Once we're done collecting the coins and putting them in the box, and we have a chance to leave, the protagonist is stopped by unknown memory, who says, "You need to know something. You need to realize. There's no reason to be afraid, you just need to see my face. You just need to know who I am. Let me help you. Stop seeking happiness. There's no reason to be afraid. That is quite similar to the phrase, be not afraid. In fact, according to biblical lore, angels only said be not afraid because everyone else at the time spoke like that. So, if an angel were to appear to someone in modern times, there's no reason to be afraid is exactly what they would say. Now, I don't think Unknown Memory is a literal angel, but I do think they are trying to bring truth to the protagonist. Quite uncomfortable truth. I have to bring back the topic of obscured faces, as it ties this section together nicely. The player, as seen in all the cutscenes where their head is visible, has no face. This is intentional. The player cannot meaningfully express emotions. Well, neither can any character in all honesty, but the player especially. They also have no voice, no ability to express emotions through tone. These are all traits that Unknown Memory shares with the player. They have the same lack of voice, the same lack of face, but Unknown Memory wishes to share theirs, wishes to express all of their real feelings. And if Unknown Memory is part of the protagonist, then Unknown Memory is the part of them that wants to stop suppressing, to stop dissociating, and to make things real. But to do that, they need the protagonist's cooperation. For literally any system to unmask, it is first necessary for the host to realize that they are, in fact, a system. That is the very first step to recovery. Unknown Memory needs the protagonist to see their face, because that's the only way the protagonist will gain a face. The only way they'll finally be able to express themselves. Unknown Memory asks them to, quote, join me in paradise, while asking them to stop seeking happiness. This is because the protagonist's version of happiness is an escape from reality, an escape from whatever current situation they're in. But Unknown Memory knows that it isn't real. Unknown Memory, although a little off with their methods, is trying to help the protagonist stop dissociating. But they don't succeed. Once again, the protagonist imagines happiness to escape from the nightmares, and that's how we end up in Homescape. Homescape is another level focused on collecting memories. This time, we can either explore the area to the left or to the right. Our brain wants us to go left, apparently. In the first level, Dream Theater, there's this. Please proceed left. And in the twist, the only door we can go through at first is the left one. It's weird, isn't it? Given that right is a synonym for correct and thus would be the obvious choice if you were to choose a direction we need to keep going in. Why is it always left? I feel as if I'm leaning more towards on something than onto something here, but I do think the protagonist constantly going left is funny. Like, they can only ever see one direction, like, they can't grasp going another way, another solution. Put a pin in that. I think that might be important. Either way, I decided to go left, which means only good memories here. Ignore the fact that I went left because I kept failing at the right section. Here, there is an emphasis on imagination. Out of every level, this is the one that seems the most nonsensical to me, with the tasks we need to do and the placement of certain furniture. Two of the memories involve playing songs, which makes me think that the protagonist was a little more than just one kind of artist. That, and they valued art, imagination, stuff that isn't real, heavily. This section is more escapist than it is dissociative, and although it's calm, I don't think it's what the protagonist needs right now. While being the most based in reality of all of the levels, it's also one of the most imaginative so far. A world wherein there is no harm. Anyway, we've collected all the memories of days past. It's time to imagine the future. Some parts of the past can be beautiful, but I also wonder what the future could look like as well. The protagonist won't mention the bad parts of the past, and they won't think of the present at all. The past future is a Frutiger Arrow-style utopia. The protagonist remarks, "It looks like how I thought the future would look like when I was a child." Otto, a resident of the city, exposits that this future has 0 carbon emissions, 0 land waste, completely renewable forms of energy, and tons of trees. I really like the sound design here. It's tranquil, it fits well with the overall style. Frutiger Arrow was a great aesthetic choice here, given its sort of early internet vibe. Truly, this is the past future. Youre talks about a secondary currency in the city, art. Here, art is sought after, traded, used as money. Here, the protagonist would flourish given their love for art. It's a place where their form of escapism is cherished for what it is, not treated as a commodity able to be easily replaced with machinery. It's nice to imagine a future like that. Upon learning that art can be traded for other valuables, we realize we can trade art for an aeroplane ticket to the Surreal Woodlands. We receive a photograph from Sora and trade it with youre to get a ticket for the aeroplane, and we fly off to the Surreal Woodlands. Surreal Woodlands is... oh, hey, it's the circular intersection sign again. A circular intersection is where traffic flows in a counterclockwise direction around Central Island. In other words, it only goes one way. Similar to how the player has been only going in one direction. It's different, but it's similar. I'm going somewhere with that. Put a pin in it. Once we go up the hill, we find Miss C in a little cabin. We have to collect 4 ingredients to help her make a soup. These ingredients are a bag of sunflower seeds, a carrot, a mushroom, and a white radish. To get the sunflower seeds, we must answer this Talking Flowers question. These questions are random, but here are some I'd like to point out. Who is your favorite? If you answer, ? Then Sunnyflower asks why you hide its face. The protagonist hides Unknown Memory's face. They avoid it intentionally. All the more evidence to my theory that Unknown Memory represents the ugly truth. What would you do, in the real world, if you suddenly got really, really sick right now? If you answer, tell a trusted adult. Sunnyflower says, quote, "You aren't a child anymore, and you never trusted any adults," which is evidence to my theory that the protagonist has some sort of childhood trauma involving the untrusted adult. After answering all of the questions correctly, you receive the sunflower seeds. In order to get the carrot, you must pull out many, many carrots in a patch, so that they have nowhere to hide. To succeed, you must first fail many, many times. A lesson I don't think the protagonist has quite learned yet, but really needs to. Once you get the carrot, it's onto the mushroom. The mushroom you need is found in a field of poisonous ones, with only eyes. They gaze upon the protagonist, quote, seeing how they fail, watching them, and judging them. It's very possible that the protagonist has social anxiety. Fun fact, people with anxiety disorders score higher on the dissociative experiences scale than those who do not. And as messages appear on the screen, the protagonist physically cannot look away from the mushrooms, hyper-focused on how everyone around them may be judging them. Once we find the mushroom, we are able to leave by imagining ourselves vacating. Finally, the white radish is found by avoiding being noticed by a lost feeling. Or rather, avoiding our fear of being noticed. Once again, we have to dissociate from our emotions to avoid harm. Or, here, to avoid a feeling we forgot we had. Anyway, radish has been collected. Time to eat some stew. We show Miss C the places we went since we last met her, and she seems concerned.
Dear, what is this?
One of the messages says, "Not proud of you for escaping into your dreams." As stated by Snoogle, the developer of this game, Miss C is supposed to represent a motherly figure, so it's quite likely that the protagonist has parental issues as well, particularly with their mother being disappointed in them. As these messages continue, scenes of them working as a dishwasher flash in and out. After the scenes stop flashing, the protagonist remarks that the place in this photo labeled "Never Forget" doesn't matter anymore. In essence, they forget about it. Miss C tells them not to dream about it, enabling their dissociation. We are told that there is going to be a fireworks show, but that Miss C won't be there. We go to the fireworks show, but then quickly leave once the protagonist realizes it's a social setting. Along the way, we have to avoid the lurkings, creatures that come out of shadows in the ground, and once we make it far enough away, the fireworks show starts. And while the protagonist is monologuing about how they forget the bad things, I don't think it's too awful here, because they're in the present now. They're learning to look at their life for what it is, not what it was or could be. As they continue on, we see Unknown Memory again, holding that sign again. If I'm being honest, so far, Unknown Memory seems about as one-track minded as the player is. Both of them are stuck on the idea that their worldview is the only solution here, both of them trying to convince the other, and it is only here, in this moment of forgetting the bad things, and accepting what is in front of them, that they are able to be peaceful together. If the protagonist wants to dissociate and forget, that means Unknown Memory only wants to realize and remember. Let's look at that brief bit of prose starting at Unknown Memory's entrance. And sometimes, when the rain comes down hardest, the most important thing you can do is to return home. Wait for the sun to rise. Wait as the rain clouds will disappear. Then the birds will dry off their wings, and together you can fly with them. When life gets to its worst, return to a safe point, rest, and then you can tackle your issues in a productive manner. Hopefully, this is a lesson that the protagonist and Unknown Memory will learn. The in-between is, well, it's great, I just didn't expect it to be Chinese. There's an exchange between the protagonist and Unknown Memory at the start. Unknown Memory gives them a reality check, saying, quote, "I know this may be your dream world, but nothing is free. Happiness isn't free. Dreams don't come just by want alone." The protagonist, like anyone else, has to work for their goals, has to work for true happiness and fulfillment. The protagonist, after a little bit of monologuing from Unknown Memory, says, "Leave me alone. I just want to be happy." They are looking for an easy solution, an out from all their problems, all their unresolved issues. They want to be happy. Unknown Memory, however, wants them to be real, to be just as upset about their current circumstances as anyone else would be, and to sink further into depression, to, quote, give up. The protagonist, filled with hope for some reason, decides not to. Quote, "I might trap myself into a limbo of sadness, but I can free myself too." The protagonist, to free themselves, must avoid their own reflections and delve into the darkness, run into nothing. Just like the protagonist always has, they choose dissociation over self-reflection, over actual coping mechanisms, but I suppose it's better for them here. The brain will always try to protect itself in whatever way it can. We have to work our way through twists and turns in this maze of sorts, while also repeating that mini-game where we avoid our own reflection. Once we're out, we find Unknown Memory again. The protagonist yells at them to, quote, "get out." In trying to force Unknown Memory to do so, they find themselves hanging from a cliff. You still haven't realized what paradise is, have you? You can have all the monologues you want, you can make all the monsters, but you're still not scary. Of course I'm not scary. I'm familiar to you. At this point, I would rather go back to real life than deal with you. But we can't go back anymore. Don't be blinded by a fake motivation. Don't be filled with hope for nothing. Reality will never be the real paradise. What do you even want out of me? You know I can't die in a dream. Right now, though, you sleeping forever in your small gray bed. It's not too different from being dead. I didn't deal with this. I just wanted to be happy and live a normal life. Oh, you want a normal life? Maybe one like everyone else? You don't even deserve your own life yet. And you can't deserve a better one just by complaining. Because in real life, you consumed more than you gave back. Maybe I can still find happiness, but I don't know where. Come on, think of a happy place. A peaceful escape. Why can't I just smile like I used to anymore? I've lived so many years. And I've been the same way for a long time. You know what's best for you, but you continue to run. I think unknown memory represents depression, while the protagonist represents mania. Both of them have a distaste for reality, but only one of them desires happiness. Unknown memory is the unfortunate truth, whereas the protagonist is the pretty lies. They want happiness, they want something other than rotting in bed, but neither of them knows how to get it just yet. They know they should face their own feelings, but they aren't quite ready for that yet. In the Chapter 3 sneak peek, they meet Muri. She looks cute, but she's also just incredibly deformed. Her body is melted into the ground. Hopefully she's the nuance that the protagonist needs. Predictions. Muri may be another piece of the player, representing some part of their childhood. I honestly don't know why she's Japanese, but she could represent the player's dissociation via television, particularly with anime. Even her schoolgirl uniform. Either that, or the language barrier represents their inability to come to terms with certain memories. Since this game has a lot to do with childhood trauma regarding school, I don't doubt her uniform has to do with that. Like, she's melting into the floor, but for some reason she still has to look good for school. She also asks the player if they'd like to be friends, so maybe she's the perfect friend in the same way Miss C is the perfect teacher. I don't entirely know, but I'm excited to see what comes of it. Either way, I think since childhood trauma has played a part in the former chapters, I don't think it'll be dismissed in Chapter 3. I'd like to see Moody and Miss C interact though, if Moody represents any of the things I think she might represent. And if I'm right about the story being about dissociation, I hope there's at least one ending where the protag and unknown memory learn to love each other. That seems to be the direction the story is going anyway. Either that, or the protagonist wakes up somehow. Review. I think it's great for what it's going for, honestly. It's described as, quote, a story game with horror aspects, inspired by liminal spaces, dreamcore, and weirdcore. And part of the essence of dreamcore is, well, dreams and the surreal nature of them. It ties in nicely with the themes of drug abuse, because there are quite a lot of drugs that can make you sleep, but can also give you really weird dreams, or fuck up your liver for some reason, or both. And most drugs that are abused create a heavy separation between the user and reality. I enjoy breaking down symbolism in this game, and if I'm off, I'll be interested in how all the questions I have are answered anyway. Especially since we've got quite a lot of loose ends that need to be tied. Oh, and the sound design's great. In particular, I love the glockenspiel that plays every time the C is on screen, and this part in the in-between is an amazing synth. Overall, I'm excited to see where the developer takes his story next. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Oh, and sweet dreams.